live. Trying this again. Better late than never, right? We're live on our YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram channels. We're going to be taking your questions here momentarily. We have Elisa on my end, as always, taking your questions. Her voice is going to be in the background as she's in another room. Been, about a month or so since we last did one of these. You guys said you want to have more of them, so we're trying to do that again. Going to be taking your questions here momentarily, so send them on in. Mentioned this before, but as you guys have guest suggestions for who you want us to feature on the show, message me on social at Graham Bensinger on all the platforms, or email me, graham@grahambensinger.com. We love the guest suggestions. They help a ton. Since we last spoke, we did our Kyle Busch episode taping, which was super fun. We spent the day with him at his race shop outside of Charlotte. I talked to Kyle for a long interview, his wife, Samantha, Football Hall of Famer, and his team owner, Joe Gibbs, his brother, also a NASCAR star, Kurt, the retired Toyota exec at Glaucus, among others. So it was like fun taping to do. And then we did the episode this past weekend featuring Annika Sorenstam, the greatest female golfer ever to live. And the super interesting part about that one was just by chance, we end up being with her the day after the insurrection, the Capitol breach, at the White House that next morning when she's receiving the Presidential Medal of Freedom from President Trump. So super interesting being in the room with her, Gary Player, a fellow recipient, and President Trump the morning after the Capitol breach. And then we did the rest of the taping at her home in Orlando. Actually going to be traveling outside of the U.S. for the first time since COVID hit the end of this week for an episode taping, which we're super excited about and we'll tell you about here in the coming days. On the COVID front, I know this has been a hell of a year for just about everybody, but hopefully you guys are staying safe and healthy. And obviously there's exciting news on the vaccination front. So hopefully everybody gets vaccinated when their time comes. And as mentioned, going to be taking your questions here momentarily. Send them in. Elisa on our end will feed them my way. Last thing I want to mention, we always get comments from folks like, where can you watch the show? Because, if you watch on YouTube or you watch on Facebook, oftentimes those are the only places you watch the show. It's also on TV in the U.S., ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox stations across the country in broadcast syndication. It re-airs on Fox Sports Nets, NBC Sports Nets. We have a handful of international TV partners. So ESPN carries the show weekly in Australia, New Zealand, Mexico, Caribbean, South America, the BT Sport in the UK and Ireland, and soon, excited to announce, TSN in Canada will start carrying the show. So GrahamBensinger.com for airtimes in your region. You can also catch clips of the show on video screens in taxi cabs. So if there's somewhere we don't air where you'd like to see us, please message that in as well. And then the full interviews you can get on podcast also every Monday. So that's where the show airs, taking your questions. And what do you got, Elisa?
Hello, everybody. I'm really excited that we're back, and I will be the bodiless voice that you hear asking Graham your questions. We'll start out with a good one. Graham, on Facebook, we have a couple of questions about your interview skills. Ryan McDaniel says, your interviews are some of the best. I see 60 Minutes in your future. Kudos. And then Lucas Ackerman asks, where did you get your interviewing skills? How'd you start out?
I think I was just lucky that a childhood hobby was able to turn into a career. So, I started with an internet sports radio show when I was in 8th grade, a 14-year-old. I'm 34 now. So it's crazy to think that the majority of my life I've now been doing, broadcasting work. But I don't think I have any particular talent at all, especially on the broadcasting front, when considering all the amazing reporters and anchors there are. just about everybody's skill far exceeds mine. I think the only thing that I recognized early on that I had going for me was just the ability to prepare and research. And, if you put an extensive amount of time in prepping for whoever it is you're sitting down with, reading, watching, listening to everything that's been done on the person predating the conversation, then that's just going to inherently create for more unique access, more interesting responses. So I think it's really that, no, special talent or secret sauce. And then you just have to listen to what the person you're interviewing says and be willing to deviate from your next question if their response warrants.
On YouTube, Tim McElroy asked, who was your favorite host or interviewer when you were growing up?
Oh gosh, there are so many folks that I like. We actually, I was so fortunate first to, born and raised in St. Louis, still live here. That's where our office is. And I, grew up having the opportunity to meet Bob Costas and Joe Buck, two guys with, St. Louis connections whose ability, I can't say enough about. So, two of the best talents in the business, and they've been so kind to me and, sharing advice and helping out over the years. So both of their abilities I really respect. Also on an interviewer front, the late Mike Wallace of 60 Minutes fame. Oprah's a great interviewer. Howard Stern's a great interviewer. Former Today Show anchor Matt Lauer was a great interviewer. So many folks with different styles, but all great conversationalists.
Definitely a lot of talent that comes out of St. Louis. On Facebook, not a question, but a really nice comment from Delvin Campbell. He says, hey, Graham, I remember you through the juice. We have spoken a few times when you were starting out. Glad to see you're still at it and going strong. And then a question, a question on Facebook again from David Weiss. He says, I like how the interview seats aren't face-to-face, but slightly angled. Is there a reason for that? Can you tell us a little bit about how interviews are set up?
That's funny that you bring that up. I feel like I have felt like before at points people would think that's awkward, the way in which we have the seats positioned. And it was mainly for, having certain camera angles on myself and the person, we're taping, and the production crew probably at times has gotten annoyed with me because I've been so unwilling to deviate from that kind of set look that we've had in now 11 years of the show. It actually started because predating this show, I hosted an NBC Sports digital video interview show, when I was 22, 23 years old, end up getting laid off of that at the height of the last financial crisis. But they took similar angles during our tapings, and I just got comfortable with it, and we've done it ever since. So nothing to it more than that. Typically for an interview setup, though, our crew, we travel with 3, 4, 5 people, depending on where we're going. They'll get to the location the day before the sit down, visit the place we're doing the interview to do a site check, and then it takes a few hours before the start time of our conversation for them to actually set up, because we have 5, 6 cameras and lighting, etc. So a lot involved on the production end to make to make everything look good.
I'm sure our director of photography would be glad to hear how much detail goes into that.
Keith, both do an awesome job on the production front on our team, as well as our producers, Ashton, Brad, who are there as well. So yeah, I mean, we have a really talented team, and I feel like really lucky. We have a great group of folks who are up for going wherever, whenever, and regardless the amount of hours it takes or whatever far-flung region of the world we're going to, their game. And it's, you don't you realize pretty quickly how, fortunate you are to be in a position like that when you've also experienced the opposite.
So on YouTube, Adarsh Abhinav, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that, he asks a really interesting question I don't think I've heard before. He says, who would you want to interview you?
Who would I want to interview me? I don't think anybody would really want to interview me, but I mean, look, to have the opportunity to spend time with the folks whose skills I really respect would be a dream come true. The Howard Sterns, the Oprahs, the Bob Costases, I mentioned the late Mike Wallace before. I actually, when I was just starting out with an internet radio show and I was in high school, I randomly called the 60 Minutes New York office once and pitched to Mike Wallace's assistant, having him on my radio show. He had just interviewed Jose Canseco at the height of the steroid era, and that interview made a lot of news. And to my surprise, he ends up not only coming on my radio show, but spending an hour with me, which was, like just a life highlight there, because he really just impressive interviewing ability. And if you at all like, journalism or, interested in interviewers, there was a great documentary done on Mike Wallace that I encourage everybody to watch. I think you can find it on Amazon. And then he also wrote a memoir as well.
On the subject of Howard Stern, on YouTube, user Howard asked if you would ever want to interview him.
Interview who?
Howard Stern.
Oh, Howard Stern. I thought you were saying the user Howard. I'm like, probably not. No. Yeah, I think Howard Stern would be fascinating. I actually just got his book where he compiles some of his best interviews over the year. But, I can't tell you how many times I've stayed sitting in my car after I've already parked somewhere, listening to his show just to see what he gets the person to say next. So I think that's, as an interviewer, what you try and capture in conversations, getting the person comfortable enough to reveal insights they would have, otherwise not normally done.
So you're pretty well known for getting your guests to say things that, are surprising. Michael T on YouTube asks, how do you make your guests feel comfortable?
Same thing to what we already talked about before, just preparation. I think if you really do your homework, it gets to a point during the conversation where they kind of forget the cameras are there, that the lights are on, that, production folks are looking on, and it's, very unnatural setting to have a conversation. But if you talk for long enough and are able to get them engaged because of your preparation, they just kind of forget everything's there, and it just becomes a conversation. And in some situations, they'll just start offering stuff up that they know you might not have found in your research, because they respect the extent to which you've prepared for the taping.
Kind of along those lines, on YouTube, KO asks, what's the question you didn't get to ask, or maybe that you wanted to ask to one of your guests but didn't?
Oh gosh, so many. I don't know of one that immediately comes to mind, but I can say this. After almost every taping that we do, I'm angry at myself for the way I handled something, or the response I gave, or something I forgot to cover. I think it's very rare that I ever walk away really pleased with the net result of the conversation. Having said that, I will say that two of my favorite tapings that we did this season are one, Brian Grazer, the legendary Hollywood producer who, with his partner Ron Howard, have created so many amazing films. I just had a ton of respect for him because here's a guy who came from nothing, never took no for an answer, and has just figured out how to navigate Hollywood and had a ton of success in doing so. So just a lot of respect for him, and we spent the day with him at his home in Santa Monica. The other one that I really enjoyed for much different reasons was the taping we did that aired to kick off the NFL season with Cowboys quarterback Dak Prescott, which, during that taping, he obviously opened up about his brother's suicide this offseason and the depression that he himself was going through, predating his brother's passing because of COVID. And the conversation we had with his oldest brother, Tad, because Dak was the youngest, the one that passed was the middle brother, and then the oldest, Tad, who also part of the taping. A gut-wrenching chat, but I think we were able to package it in a way that when we presented it NFL kickoff week, it really created a positive, constructive conversation around mental health during a time in COVID when I think a lot of people needed to hear it. So those are a couple this season that really stick out to me for different reasons that I came away from the tapings, really enjoying, and then our team did a great job in presenting them, on the various platforms where you guys consume the content.
On Facebook, just a quick comment from Rom. He says, I work for a production company that sends your show out to stations to air. I think we just got this week's episode in today. He just wants to say that he enjoys QCing your show every week.
Oh, thanks. What production company?
We'll see if he answers. Rom, that's
Okay.
for you.
Yeah, thanks for all your help, Rom. I appreciate it.
And then also on Facebook, Justin Pissarro, he wants to know, which interview do you go back and rewatch?
It's fun. It's almost embarrassing to say you go back and watch your own shows, right? Because I was there, I lived it, and it's just a weird thing to do, to go back and watch yourself. But I'll go back and watch shows occasionally for two reasons. One, I really enjoy how the producers and editors put the episode together, because you have this interview and maybe you do some activities with the person that we're profiling, but none of that comes off well in the show unless the producers and editors do a good job of figuring out what content to put where and how to splice it all together. So there will be shows that I'll watch merely for that purpose, because I just love the kind of concise way they go about putting everything together. And then there will be others that I watch just because, I'm fascinated by the people, like the one, I mentioned this before on the AMAs, but Sir Richard Branson, spending the better portion of a week with him in the Bahamas taping an episode after we had a chance meeting a month prior in North Africa. He was, just somebody I so admired and had read, both of his books. And so that's one that's just fun to go back and watch, to have the chance to spend that kind of time with somebody of that stature.
Speaking of an interesting interview, we're getting a lot of questions on Facebook about Dan Bilzerian. One of them is that Cody Tyler asked, Dan Bilzerian seems like a really cool guy to be able to sit down and interview. Can you tell us how he is as a person? And just generally people kind of wanting to know what that interview was like.
It's funny. Dan Bilzerian is one of our most watched interviews digitally, on podcasts, and going into it, while I thought it would resonate with our digital audience, I never had any idea that it would take off to the extent it did. I love Dan. I know he gets criticized. I'm sure some of it's justified, but just speaking to my experience with Bilzerian and context here, he's a social media influencer who has said he made $100 million ish playing poker, and now he, basically lives the life that any high school boy who was just written a blank check would want to live. I think, kind of how he tells the story. So, he is, for all the like scantily clad photos he posts with women and, his CBD company and all the outrageous stuff he does on social media. He is exceptionally smart. And so that was evident very early on in the conversation. We were supposed to, I might have this story off a little bit, but we were supposed to start the taping at like noon that day. The taping doesn't end up starting till 3 because he didn't wake up till 1. We sit down for a couple-hour interview. Then he invites me to have a meal with him afterwards, cooked by his chef. Then we go out in this like souped up ATV that goes 100 plus miles an hour. We had to stop at some point along the way because we also had a couple production crew in the back. One of them put their head out the window and started puking, which, was mildly amusing. And he put these like massive guns on the back of the ATV, and we stopped in the middle of nowhere in the desert. And they're like the Rambo style, shoot from the hip, $2 a bullet type guns. And I shot a gun like a couple times in my life before that. Certainly never anything that massive. And we're shooting guns off. He has like grenades. He, it was like crazy. And then, we're flying back after that, like now it's dark, through the through the dirt desert without a road. And all of a sudden, he starts texting while we're flying in the dark. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like, oh, we're going to get killed here. And you like want to say something because you're so uncomfortable, but then you don't want to say anything because you're just happy to be going along. So I was like super self-conscious. And then he stops doing it. He's like, oh yeah, that was Floyd Mayweather. He's training for his upcoming fight. This was a few years ago now. And he said, why don't we pop over? Why don't you guys come to the gym? And Dan's like, you want to go? I'm like, yeah. So anyways, do that. The night ends at like 2 a.m. by the time we're done with Mayweather Gym and the house tour afterwards. And then we literally go from there to the airport for a 6 a.m. flight out. So that's Dan. Another life highlight. I think one of the things that's so great about the show, at least selfishly for me, is like, you have these like once in a lifetime type experiences in each episode that you're fortunate enough to get paid to do. It's like I feel like the luckiest guy in the world. So we want to keep growing the show, keep growing the audience size, put it places in more places for you guys to consume the content, as well as just kind of hear you guys out in terms of folks that you would like us to feature. So continue to email in guest suggestions, graham@grahambensinger.com or @grahambensinger on all the social media platforms. We really, as I said at the top of the AMA, we really value the suggestions.
Really nice comment on Instagram from Ryan Hergott. He says, highly respect your work, Graham. Always enjoy the professional perspective you bring. So thank you so much for that, Ryan.
Oh, thanks, Ryan.
And on YouTube, this is kind of an interesting question for the time of Zoom interviews. Douglas Kretz asked, your interviewing style is great, and I really appreciate what you are doing. What do you get from in-person interviewing that you can't get online? So what do you get when you're sitting in the chair 6 feet from a person that you can't get from Zoom?
A lot. So lucky that Zoom exists, because obviously for all of us in COVID times, it's made our life infinitely easier and probably kept a lot of us employed who otherwise would have been out of jobs if not for video conferencing. So feel so fortunate. Obviously, we have that technology, but um, nothing replicates being in person with somebody, sitting in a chair across from them, looking them in the eye. Uh, there's no comparison. And any taping we've done over Zoom, I've felt like we missed an opportunity to get more that we would have otherwise had we done it in person. Um, we've done this season hedge fund billionaire Ray Dalio, who's big into ocean exploration. We've done him over Zoom. Matthew McConaughey, the actor, as well as Tom Hanks, who I had literally been harassing on email for like 4 years, and we were supposed to do him in person at a couple points in earlier years, and it just for one reason or another didn't work out. And then this summer I'm messaging with him on email, and he was in Greece at the time, and he's like, look, if you want to do it now, it's kind of Zoom or nothing. Otherwise, we can punt it. And I'm thinking to myself, punt it till later on, and I'm thinking to myself, I have been bugging him for 4 years to do this, and if this is the opportunity, I will take it. And it was super cool. I mean, he said, we can block an hour and a half for it. He wanted to start at 10:30 p.m. Greece time after, he had dinner out there. And the taping ends up going till almost 2 a.m. Greece time. So, like another life highlight. Nonetheless, I was angry at myself for not figuring out a way to make it happen in person, because it's Tom Hanks, and to get that amount of time and to not be in person, I was a little bummed about, but you make do.
So that really flows into the next question. On Facebook, King asks, what person was the hardest to book for an interview? Was it Tom Hanks or somebody else?
Oh man. Who would you say, Elisa? From the just kind of your knowledge of the show and like stories you've heard from me.
I don't know, really. You make it seem so effortless. It's like there's a flurry. No, I'm serious. Y'all, there's like a flurry of phone calls, and then all of a sudden Graham's like, oh yeah, we got Dak Prescott. Oh yeah, we're going to talk to Matthew McConaughey. But I know that there's more than that going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, there are so many that come to mind. I mentioned Sir Richard Branson. That was a 5-year process. We taped one with Jack Nicklaus, who I'd been wanting to feature forever. I had actually had a taping booked with him at his house when I was hosting the NBC Sports digital show. This was 2008, 2009, and I get laid off, and I had to cancel the taping. It was like one of the most devastating moments ever, of actually having to reach out to his guy and say, I actually have to cancel on the greatest there ever was. Took many years to get it back, and then when we got it back, we ended up spending 3 days over 4 cities with Jack, flying with him from Dallas to Santa Barbara to LA to Cabo on his private jet on a business trip. So that was one that really sticks out, and took forever to get that kind of access to him. We spent 2 days in Monaco with Prince Albert for another taping that was challenging because his staff rightly protects him, and we wanted a tour of the palace, an hour and a half interview, wanted to drive around town with him, and then go out on a boat. So given kind of that amount of time and head of a state, there's just kind of a long lead time to get a booking like that.
So on Instagram, KG Malin says, what are you drinking, dude? What's in your cup?
You don't want to take his questions. He's a childhood friend who I don't like. No, I'm kidding. That's my buddy Chip. I am drinking water. Thank you very much.
Sure he is. Sure.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably coffee or tea. Okay. So on YouTube, Tyler Lomnitz, buddy, I am so sorry. Tyler Lomnitzer says, do you ever feel awkward or bad when asking tough questions? How do you maintain an air of positivity and respect when asking those tough questions?
I mean, a couple things. I think if you've really prepared for a taping and you've grown to like the person you're profiling a lot, even predating the conversation, then if there's a sensitive topic that's going to be coming up that you know you have to ask, you or I will sometimes feel bad, ahead of time. But I feel like we have, set an expectation with each person we profile or each episode that we put out for you guys that if we're going to profile somebody, we're going to cover their life, their path to success, the highs, the lows, lessons learned. That's all part of their story and kind of makes them who they are. So I feel like not covering something would be, doing doing you guys a disservice and worsening the quality of the product that we put out. Also, I will say sometimes leading into that topic, I rarely get nervous, but every once in a while, if there's a really sensitive topic, I will feel my heart pounding in the minutes leading up to it when I know I'm getting to the place where intend to cover it. So yeah, I mean, that's how I respond to that. I, would also say generally there's a way of covering a difficult subject uh, where if you use the right tonality, lead into it the right way, and phrase the question in a non-threatening manner, that you can kind of get the desired response without being too off-putting.
So on Facebook, kind of along those lines, Griffin Cords asks, how aware are the interviewees of the questions that you're asking ahead of time? And how do you balance that preparation with the avoidance of scripted answers?
Uh, I'd say the interviewees rarely have any knowledge of the direction a conversation is going to head, outside of two exceptions. One, I mean, oftentimes we're asked for questions ahead of time, and we've never once given questions ahead of time in 11 seasons, 125 plus episodes of the show. So we have always been consistent with that. Sometimes the rep will ask for topics, and we're more than happy to provide kind of general topics. Occasionally, if there's a topic that the person does not want to cover, every once in a while we won't cover it. But if it's a topic we really want to cover, we'll say we want to cover it, and that's a conversation that will take place ahead of time with their representative, because you want to make sure if it's something that the person's already going to be uncomfortable with, where they proactively addressed it with you, that you make sure you address it ahead of time so everybody knows that's coming and they aren't thinking when you bring it up, WTF, like I'm already giving you guys this amount of time and you said you wouldn't do it and now you're doing it. So that's also though been a learning process, right? I mean, how we handle that stuff, or how I handle that stuff now at 34, is a lot different than how I handled that stuff at 19, 20, 22, 24 years old, because I think early on when I first started doing tapings, you almost don't have an appreciation for anybody's interests but your own. And you don't really recognize the time investment the other person's making, or, to do the taping, or you don't recognize the fact that their representatives putting their reputation on the line to get their client to do a taping with you. And I think early on in my career, I would just ask whatever I wanted without regard for anybody, and who cares if they don't want to cover it, etc. But you quickly realize, you know, reputation's everything, and if people feel like you aren't giving them a fair shake, or if people feel like you aren't telling their story in an accurate way, or you're unwilling to, work with them, there's going to be a limitation on your ability to continue to get access. So I had a couple instances, early on where I had to learn that the hard way because I just pissed people off and they didn't want to work with me again. And so it took a couple of those to realize, like, no, like, you, this isn't all about you. Yeah, so, it's been kind of a learning process in terms of how we handle situations like that.
So these are two similar questions. Michael Cole on Facebook and then Runt262 on YouTube ask which interview has had the greatest personal impact on you or changed you the most?
Oh man. I'm not sure. I don't have a great answer to that. I have one to throw out there though for an interview that ended horribly. And this is only, one occasion I've had the opportunity to interview him on a few occasions before, but we did, a taping with Jim Brown, arguably the greatest football player ever to live, one of the most socially significant athletes of the past century. This is a guy who retired at the height of his career to pursue acting, paves the way for Black actors, creates, hundreds of Black owned and operated businesses through his American Foundation. And the group of people he called friends back in the day were Bill Russell, Muhammad Ali, Richard Pryor, Jack Nicholson, Hugh Hefner, Malcolm X, and Martin Luther King Jr. So the stories he just has are unbelievable. And, he's gotten in trouble with the law before. And he's, in his 80s now, walks with the cane, but could still, as I've said before, kick my ass 10 times over. And I asked him at one point about, his run-ins with the law. It was like I was reading off my note card. I looked up and I saw the look in his face where it was just like, okay, this interview's over. Should not have gone there. And he just, he just destroyed me, like berated me in front of our whole crew for, it was probably only a minute, but it seemed like an hour. And then he left. We had to show ourselves out. And, you look back on moments like that and you learn because it wasn't, his issue wasn't what I covered, it was how I covered it. And so that's to go back to what I said earlier about tonality and how you lead into a question and how you phrase it. That makes all the difference in the world. And that wasn't anything against him. He somebody who I have an immense amount of respect for, who I've since talked to since that conversation and like a lot. That was my error. And you go to great lengths to avoid situations like that because nothing good comes from it.
On YouTube, Jan, I'm not even going to try your last name, I'm sorry. Jan says, how does your research work? How do you find the stories?
We have the benefit of Google, really. You just go back and try and find any significant story that's ever been done on the person, and then consume all of that in the couple weeks leading up to a taping. We also have a part-time researcher. His name is Brian. I went to middle school, high school, and college with him. A great guy who is actually a reporter for a day job, and he's a researcher on our team kind of as a side hustle, but somebody I've been working with for many years. And, I initially gathered all the stories myself, but he has since taken that over. Although I consume all the stories as part of my prep, he also does. And then a couple days in advance of a taping, we have kind of a group call where we, review notes and run through the person's life as part of the prep for the taping a couple days later.
So with all of that research, there must be sometimes when you get a little blindsided. McKay J on YouTube asks, what interview caught you the most off guard when you assumed they'd be like one way, but they actually ended up surprising you?
Oh, I mean, so many. I mean, there's never really anybody that turns out exactly how I would have expected them to be, going into it. And then, sometimes you can get to the like very last question and you get completely blindsided by something else. We just did a taping this past summer in Park City with Lindsey Vonn, the great Olympic skier who's just an amazing person, doing great stuff through her foundation, and was a taping we'd been working on for some time, and we're felt super lucky to be able to get it, especially in person during COVID, and we taped it outside at her house. And we get through this couple hour sit down interview talking about her entire life, and it was then just kind of an innocent question I asked at the end about her philanthropic work, where she starts bawling, and I was completely caught off guard, and I mean almost got emotional myself, because she's talking about how, and I think she struggled some in retirement, kind of, she misses skiing. It's, been her, uh, you know, her life's mission, like pursuing her, dream of skiing. And, like anybody, when you transition careers, it's, you know, challenging kind of navigating that. But, you know, just speaking to the work that she was doing through her charity and saving a girl from suicide who was cutting herself, I think that made her realize that she has so much more of a purpose in life than just, you know, runs on the ski slope. And so, there are always the moments in the interview that are unexpected. There are always people, almost with every taping we do, that regardless of any preconceived notions I might have going into the taping, I get surprised. So yeah, that's one of the things that I enjoy about it.
We're going to do just a couple more questions. Lots of questions about who you would want to interview on Instagram. MacMan921 asks, who is the number one person on your list of people you want to interview in the future? And on Facebook, on YouTube, Muse31 asked, what is your top 5? So pick a number between 1 and 5 and tell me who's on your list.
Oh man, I mean, there are a few that I really want. I mean, first, Elon Musk, uh, Jeff Bezos is another, a head of state is another. Uh, I'd like to interview another really top Indian sportsman, Sachin Tendulkar. I think he'd be fascinating to go back to India and do a taping over there, like we did with Virat Kohli, Michael Jordan, Lance Armstrong, Tiger Woods. Got to obviously feel for Tiger and what he's going through, right now. Serena Williams, Stephanie McMahon of the WWE. There's so many. So I know that's not even giving a top 5. I'm just rambling at this point. But yeah, I mean, there's like an infinite list of people that I'd love to profile for episodes of the show. And, we're constantly working on folks. And, it's a challenge getting the type of access that we like to get.
Another popular question, would you like to sit down with OJ again?
Sure. Yeah, I've I would like to sit down with OJ again. I've actually spent some time with him on a couple of occasions since he's, been out of prison. And, perhaps at some point sooner or later that will happen, but who knows? OJ was really the person that created early opportunities for me in the media industry, because when I started in eighth grade with an internet sports radio station, and then got on a local radio station in St. Louis, I called his agent twice a week for a year and a half trying to get an interview with him. And one day it ends up happening. And at the last minute, I set up a little handheld video camera, even though it was just for my radio show. And Good Morning America ends up buying it from me, flying me out to be interviewed by Diane Sawyer on the GMA couch. Was on other cable news outlets after that, then sat down with them again, a year and a half later, for an interview that was bought by ESPN. And then that led me to having more TV opportunities with ESPN, where I did other interviews. So OJ's somebody who I've gotten to know over the years, has always been kind to me. I think that the past times I've interviewed him, though, I've been in, basically high school. So never done it for this show. And I think it'd be super interesting to have the opportunity to profile him for an episode of this show. And, hopefully at some point it'll happen.
Okay, let's do this last question. Justin Mann on YouTube has been very persistent. He says, do you have or have you thought about getting with the younger generation to help them with journalism and interviewing? So, what kind of outreach do you do to young students, and what, if any, advice do you have for young journalists hoping to, grow up to be Graham Bensinger?
Well, first and foremost, set your sights a lot higher. Don't sell yourself short. A couple things. I mean, one, just in terms of, and really this isn't even limited to if you want a media career, it's any career. I mean, just put yourself in a position where you're getting lots of reps and getting lots of experience. It doesn't matter the size of the platform or the audience that you have. You just need to develop your craft, because that's going to benefit you immensely later in life. And I would prioritize opportunities that allow you to get reps in what you want to do versus working for some big outlet where you're a gopher. So that's, first and foremost. I think networking is really important. You could be less talented than another applicant for a job, but because you've built a relationship with somebody, you end up getting it. That is how, any industry works. But I think I was fortunate that I recognized early on the benefits of just meeting people and getting out there and meeting agents, reps, TV stations, execs, etc. And so it's a very relational business, and I would prioritize that. As I was a kid, coming up in the industry, I would reach out to anchors, reporters all the time, asking to hop on calls to pick their brains or, take them out to a coffee, etc. And, occasionally I would get the opportunities to do that. More often than not, the responses would go unanswered, or, I'd have to repeatedly follow up to get the opportunity. But people generally, with some persistence, are willing to, engage with you. People have, who've had successful careers in the business. And so I try and do the same, when people reach out. You don't always have time right away, but you try and, make time, because people did that for me. I just talked to a journalism class actually earlier this week. It is, flattering when people reach out and want to pick your brain, because I still do that for, people whose careers I really respect. And so, I welcome the opportunity to do that for others. I think you said, Elisa, that was going to be the last question. So I just wanted to mention before we wrap up the AMA, again, love the guest suggestions. Graham at grahambensinger.com. Send them my way, or I'm on social media at Graham Bensinger on all the platforms. Question I had for you guys that I mentioned on the last AMA we did. How would you guys feel if we created our own app? We don't have the full episodes of the show anywhere online, but we have these half-hour, fully produced episodes of the show that air each week on television that have, for the most part, never been anywhere online. How would you guys feel about an app that we created for those? How would you feel about YouTube channel memberships? Anything we put on there, even if it was behind some sort of a paywall, wouldn't detract from all of the other content we already put out. There would be no change on that front. It would just be, we'd be basically making a lot more available through an app and or YouTube channel memberships. So curious your guys' thoughts on that. If you wouldn't mind sending me an email or, messaging me on social or through one of the platforms, I'd be curious to know what you guys think. A couple of you messaged us after the last one of these we did with some thoughts on that. So I really appreciate that. Lastly, if you, depending on the platform you watch the show, remember we're on TV across the US, internationally. You can check TV airtimes, grahambensinger.com. You can get us each Monday when we post the full interview on podcast. And now that I just squeaked as I'm trying to wrap this up, we have, again, we're leaving the US for the first time since COVID started, the end of this week for a taping. We have some others later this month that we're super excited about. So stay tuned for new episodes. And I probably sound like a broken record when I say this, but I really appreciate you guys making the time to watch our content. I know, especially now, there's so many different places you guys can consume content and so many different platforms vying for your attention. It means the world to us that, you guys tune in. We have a team of 10, 12 folks here in St. Louis who are full-time on this show to, create content to put out there. And you guys are the reason that we had the opportunity to do this. So I so appreciate you watching. Hopefully we can continue to deliver content and stories that resonate with you guys. And thanks again. And if you like these AMAs, we will keep doing it. So until next time, really appreciate you all watching. And Lisa, thanks for your help.
Thanks, Graham. Good night, everybody.
See ya.